Hey there, welcome. Welcome to Fresh. This week on Fresh, we're talking about TV series actually. So today marks our first Story Lab. But first of all, let me introduce myself. To all of you out there who don't know me, my name is Nia Malika Dixon. I am an independent writer, director, and producer. I'm originally from Baltimore and I am a Black Muslim woman. And I started Audace Entertainment as a platform, as a media production company that provides the opportunities for people like me to create stories with film, TV, and books. And this is our second month doing Fresh, a live broadcast that I do where we talk about storytelling. And today we're going to talk about one of the shows that I have recently discovered called Shadow and Bone on Netflix that really kicked it off for me with regard to getting excited about storytelling. And so today we're going to talk about what makes a great series great, because I think Shadow and Bone is a great series. And, with regard to storytelling, demystify some of the elements for all the Black Muslim creatives out there who want to create similar shows. Not necessarily in the same genre, but shows that are so compelling that the audience just can't stop watching. And so that's literally what happened when I discovered Shadow and Bone. I watched the first episode, and the next thing I know, I was just plowing through the rest of it. I could not stop, and there are 8 episodes. And so before we get started talking about the actual series itself, I want to talk about storytelling because as a storyteller, it's very important for me when I watch something to be engaged and to be drawn in by different elements. And as a creative, I'm sure that you want to make sure that those elements are present in your project so that your audience will have that same response. So we're going to be talking about character development. We're going to be talking about story. We're going to be talking about story elements that make it a compelling story and why we as human beings can't stop watching. So let me just first start off by saying that stories are definitely a huge part of us as human beings. A lot of cultures rely on storytelling to pass down their traditions from generation to generation. It's how we share our history with each other. And in the tradition of the griot, which is the elder who is tasked with sharing the culture with the rest of the community, I like to step into that role with my community. I belong to a Black Muslim community, and with all communities, whether they're religious or culture focused, storytelling is very much a part of that. And I just want to highlight that. In the Muslim community specifically, maybe a lot of other different religious focused communities might share this, but storytelling is often pushed aside, deemed not important, sometimes even made to be frivolous, like it's a waste of time. However, I like to challenge that because all of our holy books are full of stories, and it's how we learn about ourselves. It's how we learn about each other. And as a Muslim, hey, welcome to the broadcast. As a Muslim, to me, learning about myself through the stories that I read in the Quran and learning about how we can better ourselves is very important to me. And one of my favorite ayahs in the Quran is that God has made us into different nations and tribes so that we can get to know one another. And to me, that is what storytelling is, getting to know one another. So let me just say that as a kid, I've always been drawn to stories. I grew up in the library pretty much. I learned how to read at 3. But it wasn't until I was in middle school that I realized how important stories were. My auntie used to babysit us. My mother used to do the same thing as she did and watch her stories, which were soap operas. And actually, because of my auntie, I got hooked on Santa Barbara. And if you grew up back in the 90s, the late 80s and the 90s, you know about Santa Barbara. But those stories like General Hospital and Santa Barbara were always compelling, and they make people keep coming back for more and more and more. And the reason is because of conflict, because of drama, and because we as human beings, we thrive off of that. We see ourselves in those stories. And so that's why it's so important for us to have that outlet. And that's why I challenge any tradition that says storytelling is frivolous, because it's the backbone of our civilization. So let me just jump right into Shadow and Bone and just say that the biggest reason why it was such a compelling show is because of the main character. And I'm from the theory that story is character. The character is what drives the story. And the reason that we stick with a story is because we identify with the main character. And a protagonist in Shadow and Bone, Alina, was from the beginning someone that I could totally root for. She was misunderstood. She felt like an outsider, but she had all these talents, and she was such a giving and loving person. She befriended an underdog, and she stuck up for him. And these are characteristics that made her very much someone who I could relate to, because I'm a protector in my family, and I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who probably saw themselves in Alina when they were watching. And that's like the biggest thing that will hook you in. If the character is somebody who you can relate to, somebody you can root for, you definitely are hooked. And the writers and the showrunner, they did a great job of laying down that foundation with the pilot. So the first episode, if you're not hooked in at the first episode, you're probably going to get lost. You're going to lose your audience if you don't hook them in the first episode. And Shadow and Bone totally did that. There was mystery. She had like a mysterious past. And like I said, she was somebody that you could root for. Now, if you are hooked from the beginning, you definitely want to keep coming back to find out what's going to happen next. And that taps into all of the different story elements. So Alina is a cartographer, but there's this mystical element in the story where she's tasked with charting these maps for the army. And they have to travel through this supernatural kind of portal to get to the other side of the country. And so that right there, that element itself, that magical, mystical element of danger, like how are they going to survive, definitely gets you hooked in. So character, the protagonist that we can root for, and then that story. The needs and the desires of that protagonist drive the story. And the choices that she makes. So like from the first episode, you see her make a choice that's self-sacrificing, and then we get to see her superpower, which definitely gets you hooked. So, like I said, making sure that your character, like if you're a creator, you want to make sure that your character is compelling, somebody that we can root for, somebody that we can relate to. But then also those story elements, the mystery behind her upbringing, the circumstances of her journey, and us wanting to know more, like what's going to happen next. One of the things that I really like about Shadow and Bone is that magical, mystical element. And of course, having a compelling protagonist is also part of it. And he's connected to this magical, mystical element. And I'm not going to give away everything about the series itself, but I do want to focus on the fact that those story elements are woven very delicately throughout those relationships. So you get to see not only the main character, the protagonist, Alina, and her powers unfold, but you also get to see her relationship with the antagonist unfold, the bad guy. And that to me was pretty exciting. And actually, there's a twist in the story. So like having those magical, mystical story elements are cool, but the way that they're woven throughout each episode so that they unravel in a way that leaves you guessing and wanting more, that's very important as well. So just to recap, character is a main part of it, like a character that you can root for, someone you can relate to. Then those story elements that are very important, the backstory, the mystery behind it, her powers that came seemingly out of nowhere. Later on, you get more details about that backstory. But the cool thing about weaving a story is making sure you leave the right breadcrumbs for your audience to pick up. So we don't get to know right away that she has this superpower, but there are hints to it. We don't get to know right away where it came from, but there are some elements that eventually unfold. And then as the storyteller, the showrunner, or the staff writers, or whomever wrote each episode, plant these little breadcrumbs throughout the series, you as the audience are left with the desire of like finding out more. How did that happen? Where did this come from? Why is she behaving like that? Those things are so important to storytelling, and those are the things that keep your audience coming back. And then I want to add the drama, the relationships between the characters, those emotions. Those are so important as well, because as an audience, you get caught up in that. Like going back to those soap operas. Why do we like soap operas? Because of the emotions, because of the drama between the characters, that love element. Or, for example, there are other characters that aren't a love interest that have a bond to each other, and you want to know why they have a bond, and slowly those details are unfolding. For example, the Crows. So there's a group of people who are going after Alina in this show, and their dynamic is so compelling in and of itself that you really want to find out more about them as well, along with why are they going after Alina. And each character has an individual reason why they're going after Alina. But also, the cool thing about the way the story is woven together, each character is connected to each other through a different set of circumstances that all go back to that same story element. Like I said, you want that emotional connection. You want that. It's sort of like you're filling your cup with emotion, and you're vicariously living through these characters. So, for example, Alina and Mal. Mal is her love interest in a way in the story, and you want to know why they're connected. You want to know what their connection is, and throughout each series, throughout each episode, you get to see it develop. And you get more information regarding their backstory, going back to when they were kids and now they're adults, and why they're so connected to each other. So that's pretty compelling as well. But if you're not able to tie all these elements together and you just throw them in the story and you're like checking off boxes, it's not going to work for you. A great story unfolds, like I said, with those breadcrumbs. You tease your audience with different elements. You make sure that they know certain pieces of information at different times. And then as the story unfolds, as we get to know the characters more and we follow them on this journey, sometimes perilous, sometimes fun, but always an adventure and always unpredictable, we as the audience will keep coming back. And that's why Shadow and Bone is such a good series. It starts off with, this is Alina, this is the character, who she is, and eventually we learn a little more and more about her as she progresses through her journey. And then we become more and more invested in that journey, and we want to see her win. And part of the reason why fantasy is so great is because not only is it a form of escapism and you get to have fun on this adventure, but it kind of like speaks to something within you, something that you're longing for, that you connect with in the story. So Alina is going on this journey. She's discovering herself, but she's also discovering things about her country, about her friends, about the people that she's interacting with. And we as the audience get to do the same thing. And then there's some self-reflection in there as well. So not only are you going on this journey and having fun on the way with all the swashbuckling, because there's lots of fight scenes, there's lots of magical realism, but you're also getting to know who these characters are and how they make these different choices throughout the story. And then you start to think to yourself, would I make that choice if I was in that situation? So that's always fun. So just to summarize, what makes a great story great and why do we keep coming back? A great character, the needs and desires of that character, and the fact that we want that character to accomplish those and see him or her win. The magical realism, that adventure, those story elements that keep you coming back, the drama between the characters, the mystery, those are always great. That's what keeps the audience guessing and wanting more. And then ultimately, we want to see how it turns out in the end. We want to see our main character win. And that's pretty much what Shadow and Bone did. And I think they did a great job. I challenge you to take a look and decide for yourself. See if you can find those elements, those different elements that keep you guessing, that keep you coming back for more. And tell me what you think. I definitely want to know. So that was my my reflection on Shadow and Bone, and why I think it's a great story, and why I think that you will enjoy it. And next week we'll talk about another show. But in the meantime, please do send me your comments, your questions, what you think, what you'd like us to talk about. And if there's a series that you've been watching that you think I should watch and check it out, let me know, because I am definitely on the lookout for a great show with compelling characters and a storyline that keeps me guessing. Well, thank you so much for joining in with Fresh. We're going to talk a little more next week about character and different story elements, and why a particular show is pretty good, and why you keep coming back for more. I think next week we're going to do some comedy instead of the fantasy that we did this week. And if there's a show, like I said, that you want to analyze and talk about, please do let us know. Hit us up in the DMs, or you can always email us directly at audaz.entertainment@gmail.com. I'll see you next week. Take care.